This is, of course, our hazard mitigation plan update. Craig has been putting in a lot of work on this plan, so thank you, Craig. He's our consultant working on the plan. And then thank you to the Hazard Mitigation Plan Committee. So there's a lot of different members from the town who have been working hard behind the scenes to get information to Craig to update the plan. So a lot of hard work's been put in to date to get us to where we're at. Craig's going to give us a presentation so we all understand where we're at in the process. And then after that, we're going to open it up for question and answers. So don't want anyone to think this isn't going to be interactive. It's going to be highly interactive, but just save your questions till the end. Craig's going to go through the presentation, and then at the end, we're going to do question and answers. So I'm going to turn it over to Craig now.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. I'm just going to stop my video. So that I can share my screen. Can everybody see that? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So welcome, everybody. My name is Craig Pereira. I am a senior planner with the Horsey Witten Group. I am the project manager for the Town of Scituate Hazard Mitigation Plan update. Tonight is public workshop number 1. We have been working on this plan since around this time last year. The pandemic, as well as the shutdowns, significantly impacted our ability to move forward. So we're a little bit delayed, but we've been working hard to get back on schedule. So this is our first public workshop. We'll have one more public workshop towards the end of the project. Although I am not, I'm gonna have to share a different screen because I can't move forward. Sorry about that. You all see my screen?
Yes, we can, Craig.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a Zoom platform, obviously. This was a request of participants, but we don't have chat enabled. So Kyle's just going to take a list of everybody's names for me. We need to provide an attendance list for this for FEMA as part of the requirements. And again, if you've joined recently, everybody's muted, but at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session where folks can ask questions or provide feedback or comments. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time today to participate in this workshop. The Town of Scituate Local Hazard Mitigation Committee. These are the folks that I've been working with over the last year to develop the Hazard Mitigation Plan update. We are updating the 2016 plan that is currently in place. You can see from the list that it's pretty much folks from all the different municipal departments: planning and development, fire and emergency management, engineering and public works, conservation, police, engineering. We also have some residents on board as well, and some other folks from academia or environmental, a watershed organization, and then we also have a business owner. So these are the folks that we meet with. So far, we've had 2 committee meetings, and I've been reaching out as a group, but also individually, these folks to get information so that we can begin to populate this hazard mitigation plan update. I want to remind folks that a hazard mitigation plan at the municipal level has a 5-year planning horizon. So the plan that you have in place right now is from 2016, and this plan update will have that 5-year planning horizon. So, we may be looking at hazards or impacts from hazards that are a little bit further out than 5 years, but it's not similar to a master plan or a comprehensive plan that typically has a 20-year planning or 25-year planning horizon. It's a 5-year planning horizon. So why should Town of Scituate look at hazard mitigation and do hazard mitigation planning? So FEMA requires that, or the Disaster Mitigation Act requires that all communities must have an approved hazards mitigation plan in place in order to qualify for federal disaster mitigation grants. So what that means is that if there is a natural hazard event, and following that event, there's a disaster declaration, and there are funds available, as long as the community has an approved hazard mitigation plan in place, the town can go after grant money to mitigate the impacts of that event. So it's a bonus for the community to have a plan in place that's FEMA approved. And the DMA also defines mitigation as a reduction or elimination of long-term risk to life, property, and the environment. So the mitigation process has 4 steps: assessing risks, establishing goals, identifying projects and actions, and updating and maintaining the plan. So assessing risk is the first step that we're working on and have been working on for a while. So we are looking at the natural hazards that are currently impacting the town and likely have the future potential of impacting the community as well. So FEMA defines natural hazard as any event or physical condition that has the potential to cause fatalities, injuries, property damage, infrastructure, agricultural loss, damage to the environment, interruption of business, or other types of harm and or loss. So essentially, as part of the first step in assessing risks, we'll be profiling all the different types of hazards that are impacting the community. So, and when we say profile, that means there will be a brief description of the hazard. We'll quantify the historical occurrences of those events over time. We'll have a climate change impacts on section for each hazard. We will look at and identify the property at risk, the probability of future occurrence, and we'll also map those hazards. So this is the list of natural hazards affecting Scituate, Massachusetts. I want to just step back 1 second and just say that different from the 2016 plan, we have several hazards that are new. So new to this update, this 2021 update, are climate change, drought, extreme heat, hail, landslides, and invasive species. I just want to mention that the addition of climate change, rather than having it be a standalone section, because climate change impacts different hazards in different ways and different frequencies and severities, each of the hazards that we're profiling that you see on the screen will have a similar paragraph that addresses climate change impacts on these different types of hazards. So we have them broken down into categories here. And we're also required by FEMA to include all those hazards that are included in the state hazard mitigation plan. And if we don't include them because they happen less frequently or the damages or impacts are much less, we just need to state that in the plan. So the list that I'm going to go through now in these next couple of slides are the hazards that we have been profiling and we will include in the hazard mitigation plan update. So for flood-related hazards, there's riverine and flash flooding, inland and urban flooding, heavy rain, climate change, dam failure, coastal flooding, sea level rise, storm surge, coastal erosion and shoreline change. For winter-related hazards, we have blizzards and heavy snow, nor'easters, ice, and extreme cold. And for geologic-related hazards, we have earthquakes and landslides. For wind-related hazards, we have hurricanes, tornadoes, high winds, lightning and thunderstorms, hail, tropical storms, and water spouts. For drought-related hazards, we have drought and extreme heat. We have invasive species, and we also have urban fire and wildfire. So as we started to do these natural hazard profiles for each of these different types of hazards, we utilize NOAA's Severe Event Database. And essentially that is a historical record of all the different types of hazard events that have happened over time, dating back from the 1950s. And I think it goes right now up through December of 2020. They typically have a 6-month period where they continue to update that. So we took that information for each of these different types of hazards, and we created these tables for them. And those tables will be included in the hazard mitigation plan update as well. And then we utilize FEMA's criteria for frequency, severity, and range. And based on that model for scoring, we assigned a number from 1 to 10 for each of these different types of hazards. And then with those numbers come either the low, moderate, or high ranking. So this is how our research of NOAA's database shook out. So for flood-related hazards, riverine and flash flooding is moderate ranking. Inland and urban flooding is high. Heavy rain is high. Climate change, moderate. Dam failure, moderate. Coastal flooding, high. Sea level rise, moderate. Storm surge, moderate. Coastal erosion and shoreline change is high. For winter-related hazards, blizzards and heavy snow is high. Nor'easters are high. Ice is low. Extreme cold is moderate. Geologic-related hazards, earthquakes are low and landslides are low. For wind-related hazards, hurricanes are high. Tornadoes are moderate. High winds are high. Lightning and thunderstorms are moderate. Hail is moderate. Tropical storms are moderate. Water spouts are low. Drought-related hazards, drought is moderate. Extreme heat is moderate. Invasive species is moderate, and that's something that is not included on NOAA's database, and that's something that the local hazard mitigation committee ranked themselves. And then urban fire and wildfire, we are still working on the ranking for that. So the next step in the hazard profiles and assessing risks, we need to look at assets in the community. So we're looking at both economic assets and social assets. We're looking at businesses and large employers. We're looking at tourist destinations. We're looking at social assets, including vulnerable populations such as senior citizen housing, schools, daycare facilities, or disabled residents living independent in the community. We're also looking, again, at the vulnerable cultural locations or tourist destinations, historical areas, historical buildings and sites. And then we also take a look at the economic vulnerabilities as well. So we look at the National Flood Insurance Program insured properties. So those folks that have flood insurance policies on their properties. And we also will be looking at the economic impacts and vulnerability of the FEMA flood zones, as well as various sea level rise scenarios and the sea, lake, and overland surge areas or the hurricane inundation areas. We'll also be taking a look at natural resource assets, including lifeline and utility systems, looking at the provision of drinking water, communications, electricity. We're looking at wetlands and conservation and recreation lands, but then also looking at impacts to essential buildings and critical facilities. So government or municipal buildings, hazardous facilities or sites, roadways and bridges, and then GIS mapping. So GIS mapping is Geographic Information System Mapping. It's digital mapping platform. We'll be developing mapping that's a requirement of FEMA. Some of the maps that we are developing include hurricane tracks over time, earthquake, FEMA flood zones, and then average annual snow. And then again, as part of that economic vulnerability analysis portion of the risk assessment, we will be taking the parcels data layer and we'll be overlaying that on the various sea level rise scenarios, 1 and 3 feet, possibly more. And then also the hurricane inundation zones as well, so that we can identify what the total economic impact of these different types of hazards are to the community assets. The next step in the mitigation process is to establish goals. So these goals are intended to be more broad brush and overarching. We don't get down to the details in these community goals. That's what the mitigation action strategy is for, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So the 2016 Hazard Mitigation Plan has a strategy and goals to support that strategy. So what we'll be doing as a committee at our next meeting is reviewing the strategy and reviewing these goals to determine if we want to keep them as they are, if we want to modify them, or if we want to delete them as is and start fresh. So the strategy is the Scituate Hazard Mitigation Strategy advocates the concepts of disaster resilience, resilient and sustainable communities. Scituate is building a disaster-resistant community and achieving sustainable development through the commitment of state and local government and its policymakers to mitigate hazard impacts before disasters strike. And the goals in support of that strategy: to ensure that critical infrastructure sites are protected from natural hazards, to protect existing residential and business areas from flooding, to maintain existing mitigation infrastructure in good condition, to continue to enforce existing zoning and building regulations, to educate the public about zoning and building regulations, particularly with regard to regulations that may affect teardowns and new construction, work with surrounding communities to ensure regional cooperation and solutions affecting multiple communities, and encourage future development in areas that are not prone to natural hazards, educate the public about natural hazards and mitigation measures, and make efficient use of public funds for hazard mitigation. In my experience, this is a very long list of overarching goals that I will most likely encourage the committee to whittle these down a little bit so that they're a little bit more broad in nature, and leave the details again to the mitigation action strategy. So the next step in the mitigation process is to identify projects and actions. So the first thing that we do is early on is do our research and analysis of the existing plans, studies, and reports that the town has completed since the last plan update. So since 2016, we have reviewed, and I'll get to those slides in a little bit, all the different types of plans, studies, and reports the town has done. We pull those goals, actions, and objectives from those plans, and those begin to populate our mitigation action plan for this Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021 update. When we do identify those mitigation actions, we are going to be separating them out into these 6 categories: planning and prevention, property protection, natural resource protection, structural projects, emergency services, and public education and awareness. And the reason that we separate these out into these 6 different categories is because we want this hazard mitigation plan to remain a living document that is easily accessible by residents, by municipal departments, and by municipal officials. And if we can narrow these mitigation action down into these 6 different categories, folks are going to know exactly where to go to look to see if there's an action involved, and if there's a funding mechanism or a funding opportunity in front of the community, they'll be able to know which ones to draw from this. So when we do identify those mitigation actions or projects, and they'll be based on a review of the town's identified risk and vulnerabilities. So we'll take a look at the capability assessment, those existing plans, studies, and reports, but we'll also be looking at the hazard profiles that we've developed over the evolution of the project. Each mitigation action will have a brief description of what the intended action is, who the responsible parties are, both the primary and supporting departments, a proposed time frame for completion, and then potential funding sources for that. Once we have all of our actions identified, at our final local hazard mitigation committee meeting, we need to do a prioritization of actions utilizing FEMA's STAPLEE method. This is a requirement of FEMA. It's considered an abbreviated cost-benefit review. So we need to take a look at every single action. We need to look at the costs, and we need to look at the benefits, and we need to assign a numerical number based on these 7 different categories. Is the action socially acceptable? Is the action technically feasible and provide appropriate levels of protection? Does the town have the capability to complete the action? Will the town support or oppose the project? Does the town have the legal authority to complete the action? Is the action cost effective? And will the action affect the natural environment? So implementation of the hazard mitigation plan and the action strategy, again, it's going to be informed by the town's capability assessment and what the town can and can't achieve. And that'll shake out when we do that STAPLEE prioritization. But then we'll also be looking at plan adoption and incorporation into existing plans. One of the biggest pieces to a hazard mitigation plan and to all the other municipal documents is to ensure that there's consistency across all the municipal documents. So we'll be looking to make sure that once this hazard mitigation plan update is approved by FEMA and adopted by the community, we're going to want to make sure that as other municipal documents get updated or get developed, that these actions get carried over into those plans. The more that a community can show that they have vetted these actions across multiple platforms, multiple demographics, the more teeth the community has when they do go after grant funds. So it's really important that the hazard mitigation plan remain that living document. And then the last piece of the mitigation process is to update and maintain the plan. So we as a committee need to state in the actual plan how and when the town plans to update the plan. So we need to state that at a minimum, the hazard mitigation action strategy will be reviewed on an annual basis so that we can see the progress or lack of progress the community's made, and then how that plan is going to be maintained. So who's going to be responsible for pulling this committee together, how often or how frequently this committee is going to meet. And again, let's keep in mind that a hazard mitigation plan has a 5-year planning horizon. So in 5 years from 2021, this plan will be in the process of being updated again. So these next few slides speak to the capability assessment that I spoke to just recently. So this is a review of the existing plans, studies, and reports that the town has done or completed since the 2016 plan. This first slide is the first project is Building a Resilient Scituate Climate Vulnerability Assessment and Action Plan from March 2018. And this is the MVP plan, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Top priority actions included addressing the vulnerability of the coastal business districts, addressing the vulnerability of Scituate's municipal infrastructure, and initiate a public outreach and marketing campaign with a sense of urgency on climate change and resilience in Scituate. And I just want to make one statement about this report specifically and the MVP process and program in general. Because the town completed the MVP process in 2018 and is now a MVP certified community, this becomes another primary funding mechanism for the community. So as long as you have actions included in your MVP report, now that you're an MVP certified community, twice a year, there are action grants that the Commonwealth puts out and the community can apply for funding to implement these action plans. So it's, again, the MVP program and the MVP process can kind of be viewed as an abbreviated hazard mitigation plan process. It's kind of like a one-day quick view of the hazards that are impacting the community. And the difference between an MVP process and an HMP process is that an MVP process is by invite only. So municipal officials and targeted stakeholders were involved in that process, where a hazard mitigation plan or an HMP process is the public process. The next plan was the Open Space and Recreation Plan from 2018. Goal number 2, to protect Scituate's natural shoreline and coastal features and waters. Actions include to continue to develop bylaws and best practices that relate to preserving and enhancing the natural shoreline and coastal resources and the current status and with expected impacts of sea level rise. To continue strongly to enforce town bylaws, discouraging new construction in the floodplain. Implement recommendations from the Coastal Assessment Study and other recent and ongoing studies as applicable to shoreline protection. Also, to initiate recommendations from the Coastal Assessment Study and other recent and ongoing studies. Initiate public education on shoreline and coastal resources protection, as well as issues affecting public use of the beach. Work with surrounding communities on long-term planning to ensure regional cooperation on solutions to coastal hazards. Goal number 5 references enhancing the natural beauty of the town's landscape by protecting existing open space while promoting appropriate use. One of the actions include preparing management plans for Scituate's public beaches. So again, these are the different types of actions that at the end of this process, we'll be pulling together into one document and be proposing that to this local hazard mitigation committee for consideration to be included in the 2021 update. The next study is a comprehensive wastewater resilience feasibility study completed in June of 2019. This study assessed the town's wastewater facilities vulnerabilities to flooding and coastal flooding. Recommendations included political implementation, so communicate existing and future physical and financial risks, building consensus, establishing a planning group, and then integrating results into the day-to-day administration. The next recommendation is cost and recovery or revenue opportunities implementation, so identification of funding mechanisms, applying for state and federal grants, establishing a wastewater resilience fund, implementing incrementally increasing sewer connection fees, include near-term measures in the general budget, utilizing system expansion bond funding to include mitigation improvements. And then the third recommendation was regulatory implementation, integrating recommendations into the master plan and preparing final engineering and long-term measures. So again, it's that consistency across municipal documents that's really vital and important here. The next item is elevating roadway improvements and dune beach nourishment along North Hummerock for improved coastal resiliency in March of 2017. This plan developed a conceptual plan for elevating a portion of Central Avenue along northern Hummerock Beach and optimizing a dune beach nourishment design for storm damage protection. Recommendations include elevating Central Avenue, constructing dunes along the Hummerock North, and nourishing the beach along the entire Hummerock North and South. The next study was the Scituate Harbor Sustainability and Resilience Master Plan, August 2020. This was developed to guide future growth, conservation, and infrastructure enhancements over the next 25 years, with a focus on reducing the pathways of ocean water into the Scituate Harbor Business District. And I'll talk about that storm tide pathways project in a couple of slides. Recommendations include incremental elevation and adaptation of the coastal perimeter of the district that integrates with an elevated harbor walk, new coastal amenities, and open space features. This approach is combined with the protection and improvement of the natural systems that provide protection to the district and adjacent shoreline at the Kent Street marshes and the banks of the Scituate Brook. The addition of green infrastructure in the district to protect and improve water quality of the harbor. The next study is the Town of Scituate Coastal Community Assessment, completed in September of 2018. This was developed to learn more about what residents, business owners, and civic organizations, including staff, town staff and leadership, about the risks and opportunities associated with being a coastal community. Some of the recommendations include a robust community engagement process, to adopt a long-term coastal resilience vision and strategy, to review, summarize, and present in a simple format the key actions that have been taken in recent years to improve coastal resilience in Scituate, and the relevant recommendations that have been made in previous studies and plans, very similar to what we're doing here today and what we're doing as part of this capability assessment portion of the hazard mitigation plan. Convene community conversations about managed retreat, and review and update and document the emergency management protocols for coastal storms. The next is the Town of Scituate annual flood mitigation progress report from 2019. And this is the 5-year report that the town submits under participation in the community rating system. So this includes efforts to anticipate and mitigate activities along high hazard coastal areas and inland floodways, which include foreshore protection, sea level rise and climate change impacts, FEMA elevation programming, emergency management, and outreach and education. Next is a complementary piece to that annual flood mitigation progress report. It just shows a list of the different types of coastal grants from 2015 and 2019 that the town has either received, been awarded, or completed. Under the coastal grant section, you can see that there are various offices. There's the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Some of these grants come from FEMA. Some of them are from Environmental Protection Agency. It has a list of the different projects, and then it also has the funding and the status. So as you can see, all the projects on this slide have been completed since during the time frame of 2015 to 2019. Again, it's the same situation. You've got MAPC, you've got Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EPA. All the projects on this screen also have been completed to date. I should have said this earlier, but this PowerPoint presentation will be provided to the town and will be posted on the project webpage, hosted on the town's website, so you can view it later on and at your leisure. Again, we have additional grants, some FEMA funding here, some MEMA, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funding. Again, MAPC, Coastal Zone Management. These projects are a variation of completed or in progress, awarded, or obligated. So as you can see, based on all of the different slides that I reviewed for the existing plans, studies, and reports, based on that extensive list of coastal grants that have been acquired and majority of them completed, looking at flood mitigation and climate adaptation, the town's really done a ton of stuff over the last 5 years and should really be commended for that. It's not often that I'm working on a hazard mitigation plan for a community where so much work has already been done. So I think it's a great nod to the community. This last project I mentioned earlier, it's mapping storm tide pathways in Scituate and Cohasset, assessing coastal vulnerability to storms and sea level rise. So this just looks at the different types. So 299 pathways were identified for Scituate that provide critical information on the exact location of potential flooding, where each pathway comes through, so that the town can then take a look at those and can identify actions to prevent future inundation. And then we've got the Scituate 2040 Master Plan update that was just recently drafted, June 2021. The master plan serves as a guide for the town for future decision-making and actions that have long-term impacts on economic, social, and physical resiliency. So some of the actions include under climate change and sea level rise, elevating structures, enhancing and raising seawalls and revetments, enhancing and reinforcing hard engineered infrastructure, providing beach nourishment, investing in soft engineered infrastructure, implementing boulder dikes, and in low-lying areas susceptible to flooding, converting roads to bridges. Under climate change and ecology, expanding wetland protections, reducing clear cutting. Under land use, establishing programs and policies for buyouts, land swaps, relocations, transfer of development rights to allow for relocation. Under zoning, consider reducing development on flood hazard areas. Under community services and facilities, evaluate existing community facilities for problems and as assets for impacts related to climate change. Under transportation infrastructure, flood-proofing key transportation routes and anticipating heat damage to roadways. And under water infrastructure, to prepare for droughts and the effects of sea level rise on groundwater and saltwater intrusion. So that wraps up all of the capability assessment, the existing plan, studies, and reports. So again, the town has really done a considerable amount of work planning and trying to mitigate flooding, hazard mitigation events, climate change, and to make sure that they're pushing the community towards a more resilient future. And then this last piece is the 2016 plan report card. So part of the requirements for FEMA is that we look at the mitigation action strategy that's included in the 2016 plan, so in your current plan, and we go through and we identify what's been completed and can be removed from the mitigation action strategy, what's completed and remains ongoing, which means that would get moved into the capability assessment, what hasn't been completed and needs to be carried forward into the hazard mitigation plan, and then what needs to be carried forward but needs to be revised. So I also want to remind folks that the mitigation action strategy, even though there are a number of actions and there are a number of actions that have significant costs associated with them, A hazard mitigation plan does not hold the community responsible for getting anything done or doing any of it. It's really supposed to be looked at as an opportunity for the community to identify what their risks and vulnerabilities are, so that as funding becomes available, the town can utilize their mitigation action strategy, and they can go after funding to remediate these issues. So even though there may be, like I said, there may be significant costs associated with some of these, it does not put the town on the hook to complete any of it. You need to look at it as more of a giant wish list. So the first mitigation action 1, is to elevate repetitive loss structures. That's been completed, yet remains ongoing. Since the 2016 plan, there have been 22 new elevations. In total, the town has completed or permitted 69 elevations, with 11 additional applications pending. Action number 2, protect key roads, bridges, and intersections. That's been partially completed, yet remains ongoing. The DPW constructed 200 feet of new seawall along Edward Foster Road across from the new Marine Park. And the Lighthouse Road concrete seawall is currently in preliminary study, design, and permitting stage by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as part of a Sands Hill seawall replacement project. Action number 3, foreshore protection. Partially completed, yet remains ongoing. So DPW, again, constructed the 200 feet of new seawall along Edward Foster Road. Completed seawall projects include reconstruction of the Man Hill Egypt Beach cobble berm, reconstruction of the section of Cedar Point revetment that protects the historic lighthouse and park, and repair of the North Jetty. Future seawall projects that are FEMA funded is the Minnow Beach, North Scituate Beach, Shore Acres, First, Second, and Third Cliff, as well as town-funded future seawall projects. Closing sections along Oceanside Drive are in final design and scheduled for construction in 2021. And then future seawall projects that are U.S. Army Corps of Engineers funded includes closing sections along Oceanside Drive, Turner Road, between Turner Road and number 3 Rebecca Road is in design phase. Action number 4 is the drainage and culvert repairs, improvements, and upgrades. And that's partially completed, yet remains ongoing. Culvert upgrades at Bailey's Causeway and Gilston Road, and ocean outfall was refurbished on Oceanside Drive. Action number 5 is CRS, Community Rating System Participation, implementation of a public information program. That was not completed over this 5-year period, so that will get carried over into the 2021 plan update. Action number 6 is to complete the coastal assessment. That was completed in August of 2016 through a grant with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Action 7, to implement recommendations of that coastal assessment. They have not been completed, so those will get carried forward. The elevation of and berm along Hummerock Road was pursued and abandoned due to limited public support. Action number 8 is beach and berm nourishment and replenishment. That was partially completed. Implementation remains ongoing. Action number 9, install strategic power grid shutoffs. That was completed between 2016 and 2018, and that was solely funded by the utility companies. Then action 10 is the installation of generators. That's been completed. So all schools, public safety building, town hall, board of health, communication shed, the old gates and recreation, the new senior center, station 1, the water treatment building, and the sewer department have all received generators. And that is the final list of the plan report card. Again, this is a requirement of FEMA. We need to show what the town has accomplished over the last 5 years and what they still need to work on. And so again, the items that were not completed and should be carried forward, those will begin to populate the hazard mitigation action strategy for this 2021 plan update. We have an online public survey that is currently open. So this is available. The link is also available on the project webpage hosted on the town's website. This should take you no more than 5 to 10 minutes. What we're trying to do is trying to better understand where folks consider themselves as a household and where they consider the town as a community in regards to preparation for natural hazards and vulnerabilities. It also has a couple of questions about how folks typically receive information, and we're going to use some of this information to better distribute information on hazard mitigation planning to the community at large. The survey checks one of the boxes for community outreach and engagement through FEMA. It's completely anonymous. And again, if you go to the project webpage on the town's website, to the hazard mitigation update webpage, this link will be available for you. We typically leave this survey open for a month to 2 months, and depending upon the participation rate that we get, we can always keep it open later if necessary. Our project schedule, we plan to have a draft update available for public comment, which again is a requirement of FEMA for fall or winter of 2021. Typically, we will have the draft available for public comment on that project webpage hosted on the town's website. And we will likely have hard copies available in the community, perhaps at town hall or the town library. And then we plan to have a draft update to MEMA for, this says winter 2022. We're hoping for fall, winter 2021. And that's hoping, these are target dates, recognizing, it depends on how information comes in and what we still have left to do. But this is our targeted plan for the draft plan to be ready and available for public comment. Once we do have a draft plan available, we will also send that out to the adjacent communities for their review and their comments, which is also a requirement of FEMA. And it'll also go to the select board for their review and approval so that we can forward it on up to MEMA. Any questions or comments, you can certainly contact Kyle Boyd, the Director of Planning and Development. His information is there. He's also on the town's website, and then my information is here. And my information is also located on the project webpage and the town website as well. If you want to reach out to me or Kyle individually, feel free to email us or give us a call. And that concludes my presentation for tonight. We can open it up now, Kyle, for questions.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Craig. I'm gonna turn off. I think I'm gonna now allow participants to unmute themselves.
Yep.
But it would be
Kyle,
helpful if anybody who has a question, if you could just raise your hand so we can try to keep some organization. But anyone with a question, go ahead. Oh, I see Karen Canfield with their hand up.
And
Go
Craig,
ahead, Karen.
I'm sorry, Craig may want to stop sharing. We can leave that up there if you want, Craig, but it's just.
Get rid of it. I like to see all the little boxes. Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, Karen.
Killing me. I was muted all this time. You know that, right?
What's that?
It was killing me. I was muted all this time. But
Oh, yeah.
this is great. And I mean, we've got the choir here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about some of the stuff, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that I just feel like I want to just kind of, hi, Craig, nice to meet
Hello,
you.
nice to meet you.
So first and foremost, it's Linda Ferguson, not Lynn.
Okay.
And as somebody that's an editor, I really watch those things. But so I look at all this awesome work. I really want to make sure that we're not just checking a FEMA box, because as you noted, Craig, the town has done so much work that's built on itself, and we're making progress. And we are the #1 town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with the highest number of FEMA claims.
Right.
So we are it. We're the test. So to me, this is not a box checking exercise. This is really important stuff. So first I have, okay, very generic question. I don't know what a water spout is. Murphy, do you know what's a water spout?
It's a column of water that forms over a water body.
Like a tornado on the water?
Yes, essentially.
Okay, we don't want that. Okay. And you did note on the dovetailing with our master plan. So we're gonna, this is really important. We have all of these great things and they all need to say the same thing. So thank you for emphasizing that. You said you're gonna get the slides. I'd really love to have a copy of those so I can make sure that the rest of the board has seen those slides, because honestly, I texted Jim, our town administrator, earlier, and I was not 100% sure that anyone even knew this work was happening. And it's really important to our future planning. So is there going to be an interim presentation to the board, or are we going to just get sort of your final?
So we will do a second public workshop, and we can either do that like we're doing right now, or we can get on the select board's agenda, and we can do that as part of a public hearing. Really depends on how the community wants to do that.
Well, I really think this one was very under publicized, and it's important work. So I think we should figure out, I mean, we can do that offline, but whether it's at a board meeting or a standalone, I think this one should be a little bit more widely known, because, there's nobody in this community that doesn't realize that we're in peril and to think about this stuff. One thing you didn't, if you mentioned it, I missed it. We have an outstanding permit for renourishing North Scituate Beach, which is in theory supposed to support all of our beaches. And, we've run into some, headwinds trying to actually get that accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be something that we should think about, because I don't know, Kyle, I think we got 3 more years, maybe 2.5 years on the permit. It's ready. And so if we can look at that as possibly as a thing that can get a little more pressure as an accomplishment, that would be helpful. I love I get the idea. If we get this plan in place, we get all our boxes checked, there's funding we can go for. So that is huge. And the last thing I had was, we got to make sure that the survey that you mentioned at the last slide, we have to, Kyle, can you make sure that that gets pushed out?
Yep.
Because honestly, I don't think people know. And it's, I know there's a lot of survey weariness, but this is probably the most important thing that our community is going to be doing is, the ocean's not going to start settling down and we're on it. So we got to figure out how to address it. So those are mine. I'll mute now.
So Karen, and just to let folks know, so I also proposed to the local hazard mitigation committee to change up the update layout a bit, because I have worked with MEMA and FEMA to develop an outline for a hazard mitigation plan that aligns itself nicely to the document that FEMA is going to use to review and approve this. So when I say check boxes, I don't necessarily mean check it to kind of be done with it, but I mean it addresses everything that FEMA is looking for in a more comprehensive and holistic view. So, and, utilizing that layout and that format is also going to make it, hopefully make the MEMA's review and FEMA's review a little bit more expedited, because everything kind of flows consistently based on that plan review tool. So we're hoping that, that is a great mechanism to not get caught up in FEMA's queue.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I mean, we are ground zero in Massachusetts. So let's be the gold standard for sure.
Sure.
So thank you. And I want to know Drew's dog's name.
Thank you, Karen. I see Jim with his hand up. So Jim, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, this may seem kind of esoteric, but under invasive species, are we talking about flora and fauna or just invasive species? I'm thinking about different kind of pathogens that might be tick-borne or bird-borne. You know, we're coming out of a pandemic that nobody saw coming, and it may have been bats. Who knows? But I'm thinking about the kind of tick-borne pathogens that people are coming down with. So, do invasive species include insects?
Okay,
And
we're looking at plants and both land and water-based.
okay,
And that's really it for invasive species.
land and water-based. Okay,
Yes.
so that could be pretty. So not airborne. Is that what you?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Jim. I see Linda with her hand up. Whenever you're ready, Linda.
Hi, yes, sorry, I'm running after my dog at the same time, but I was on the, I thank you, Karen, for bringing up that, the link for the survey because, you know, I don't remember seeing it, but I could have missed it. The last year, I think, and year and a half has been a whirlwind for pretty much everyone.
It's only active today. So
Oh,
we kicked it off tonight at this workshop.
oh, okay.
Okay.
That's why I haven't seen it.
That makes me feel better. At least I didn't miss it. But my other thing, I was on the Sustainability and Resiliency Master Plan Committee. So like, is somebody working on that plan? Like, are we working on instituting that plan or is that just another plan? Like, I feel like we came up with a pretty good plan to mitigate the, water or flooding in the harbor. So where does that stand in relation to this plan?
That's a good question, Linda. Right now we are, I was actually just talking to Stefania, who's the new coastal management officer. We are identifying the projects we want to move forward within the downtown harbor master plan. We're going to be attacking some grants, but right now, like from a larger scale perspective, what we're doing is we actually got fortunate enough, a gentleman who used to work for the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs is helping us come up with, he's basically compiling all the recommendations from all the different plans that have been done from a coastal perspective. And we're coming up with a priority matrix to move forward on. Basically, it's going to prioritize all the different projects, and then we're going to be moving forward on which ones have the highest priority for the community. And I assume the harbor will be at the top of the list.
Okay, and because one of the reasons I ask is it seemed to me that we'd kind of decided on doing sort of a park-like thing in the harbor over by, Cole Parkway Bandstand area. And now there seems to be a huge push to do pretty much the exact same park over in Pier 44. And not for the same reason. Obviously, the park in the harbor was going to be, supposedly maybe raised or whatever to, prevent the floodwaters. But I just want to make sure that, and maybe it's you, and it sounds like you've hired some guy to do it. Just want to make sure we're not planning the same thing in two different places. And clearly the town's not going to do both. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, they're definitely separate initiatives. The primary goal of Cole Parkway is to protect that area, and the park idea was to beautify it while you're elevating the edge. So it's not something that like excludes another park from happening somewhere else. They both can happen in separate areas, perfectly fine to beautify the harbor. So it's not as if because that park is happening, we're not looking at protecting Cole Parkway. Actually, that's probably the number one, the next project. I don't want to promise that, but a high priority of mine in regards to grant applications is to apply for design funding for Cole Parkway, conceptual design. Are there any other questions or comments? don't see any. Oh, Chief.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
So just an update on the storms that we're trying to get back from FEMA, the 2012, 13, 15, and 18. We had a Zoom meeting today, Sean McCarthy and I, with many players from MEMA. We actually had a scare. Some of the person that's in charge of FEMA, we go back a little bit. We agreed about 2 years ago to allow us to consolidate those 4 storms. But being possible to separate those 4 storms and separate the sections of the damage in first cliff, second cliff, third cliff, and mine. So we had an agreement that they allowed us for the first time to do a consolidated project, do them all together. And we actually have DZM now working on that to hopefully, but in August, have their final documents and engineered plans done. The new guy that came in from FEMA, we believe that's the reason, said you can't do this. And so MEMA was diligent on this and worked with Scituate, and they actually got all the documentation back from 2 years ago that said we were allowed to do this. So it's not done, but we believe they're going to back off on that sort of removal of the consolidated project. So we think it's going forward. GZM right now, the town engineer, should hopefully sometime in August, we're trying to put a deadline of mid-August to have their engineered plans done for third cliff. If we get those plans, they'll come back to the town for review and hopefully start the permitting process for this. So all of our projects, paper, have a deadline of December 31st of this year. It's not going to happen. Things have been slow all of a sudden, and also COVID put everything on hold for a year and a half. So, but they are moving forward. Hopefully this fall we have some sort of sense of timeline. We get permits, and later this fall we'll be starting construction, starting on the third cliff. First cliff, second cliff will be following. Those are smaller projects. That's an update from the FEMA end as far as it's working.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so we'll be following up with the committee members for the next meeting. That'll be the next step.
We'll also I'll provide the PowerPoint presentation to Kyle and Seth, and we can post it on the project webpage, host it on the town's websites.
Great. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you everyone for your hard work so far on this plan.